how do you then take that and apply that as part of a Twitter growth strategy? What would that look like?
Yeah, there's a few things. So now that you have like kind of your niche in your voice, you now actually need to start writing, right? So
Right.
X at the end of the day is a writing platform. In the future, it might be a video platform. They're working towards it. But right now, the type of content that's favored more than anything is writing. And so now that you have your niche and your voice, you know what you want to write about, you actually have to write. And here's the thing that people don't, I think a lot of people don't want to hear is like, you actually have to be a good writer. You can't just write anything and then hope it succeeds, right? And so that writing is a skill. It's a skill I personally have been working on for my entire life. You know, when I was 5 years old, my parents bought me a typewriter and I wrote up stories and like I was writing novels on the typewriter. And so at the end of the day, it's a skill. And how do you build a skill? You practice. Like I got books on my desk on writing that I'm always referring to. I have a bunch of books here, you know, and I'm always working on improving the art of writing and improving the art of storytelling. And so you found your niche, you found your voice, you found what makes you authentically you. Now you actually have to write and you actually have to be able to tell an interesting and compelling story. And so that's just pure practice. That's pure studying. That's pure tinkering, experimenting. I'm always experimenting with different storytelling styles. And so that's something that is the next step. Start writing, start truly focusing on the craft of your writing. There's a lot of people who just neglect that and say, oh, I can just write whatever and it'll work. No, you actually have to learn what are storytelling structures, right? There are structures to every story. You know, what makes a good story? What keeps people's attention from beginning to end? Because the algorithm, really, there's only one metric the algorithm cares about, and that's eyes on content. How long do people read your content? Do they quickly skip over it, or do they read the entire thing? So your goal is to get them to read the entire thing. How do you get them to read your entire piece of content? By telling a compelling story beginning to end. And so if you can master writing, master storytelling, you can get people to read beginning to end. And if you can do that, the algorithm's just going to keep pushing you in front of people.
What is the number one copywriting book you would recommend anyone here?
I would probably say the number one is The Elements of Style. It's a really short, quick read, and it's basically a guide on how to write as simply as possible, which I think is really relevant in 2023 and on X. Everyone's attention spans are as low and small as it's ever been. And the whole book's just on writing very, very simply and using simple language and getting straight to the point. So that book, I think it's like 80 pages long. I would recommend that one. This is like the first one.
Beautiful, beautiful. But then the argument becomes, especially on X, it is incredibly hard to start gaining traction on the platform. You could have the best content in the world, but if you're starting from a fresh slate, it's incredibly hard to start getting eyeballs. So what is like, do you come from the school of thought that just write good content and the algorithm will pick it up eventually and you will get the eyeballs that you deserve? Or is there also a second front that you need to have a battle on, which is engaging with other accounts, actually building relationships with these people, and then start onboarding these people into that little kind of ecosystem that you're building within that niche that you're building, the Alex niche, the Leon niche?
Yeah, it's from 0 to 5,000. I mean, it's really different strategy from every tier, from 0 to 100, 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 5,000, 5,000, 10,000, 10,000 up, 100,000 up. Like it is a different strategy for each. It's not enough to just write good content, as you said. You need to, especially when you're under like 5,000 followers, you need to engage in what I call guerrilla warfare. And what I mean by that is like when I was 0 followers, right, I could have been writing the best content in the world and no one would have noticed it. It's very hard to grow from that point. So what you need to do is you need to engage in guerrilla warfare. So, you know, your audience is pretty familiar with NFTs. What I did when I started was I found this project that I was interested in at the end of 2021 called Creeps.
Right.
And I bought like the mint pass. It wasn't even minted out yet. I bought like 13 of the mint passes. I was super into it. And I went into the Discord and I was just the loudest person in the Discord. Like I was like king of that Discord, right? And then I go on Twitter and I would tweet about the project all day long. And what happened was I started picking up all the followers from that community because I was super into the community. People wanted to hear what I had to say. I was kind of the king of the community, right? And that got me from 0 to 2,000 followers, which might be the hardest kind of plateau to get over. And when you're under 2,000 followers, your content doesn't matter. Like you could write the greatest thread in the history of the world. If you're at 100 followers, nobody's going to see it because at any given moment, you're only 20% of your audience is going to see any tweet you put out. So if you're at like 100 followers, it's only like 20 people. And at that point, you're pretty hopeless of it going viral. So when you're under 5,000 followers, you really got to engage with guerrilla warfare. And you need to get in communities. You need to be loud. You need to reply to people in those communities, in those micro niches. You need to be the loudest person in that micro niche. And then once you've picked up the people from that micro niche, you now have a base of an audience that you can now grow on top of, layer on top of, try new things and start to experiment and grow from there.
Right. Okay. Beautiful. So guerrilla warfare. Exactly. One thing I want to talk about is niche versus broad content. So we've all seen these accounts on Twitter that are so broad that they are experts at nothing. They might have a big audience. These are typically the shit posters, but they're not experts at anything. And this makes it incredibly hard for them to monetize their personal brand. They can be shit posters or not. But then you have different people that might have a much smaller audience, but they are experts at one certain industry. And it makes it a lot easier for them to build a brand, build a business around what they have to say. But obviously you need a balance of the two, because like you said, when you're too niche, all of a sudden you get stuck in that kind of like market of maybe 1,000 people interested in that specific content. So for you, on a scale, if it was a balance, would you think that the perfect balance is like 40% niche content, 60% broad, maybe 60 niche, 40 broad? Where would you see yourself on that balance?
It's constantly shifting and changing based on what your size is. Like if you're 1,000 followers and you have a really small audience, like you just can't like write like a thread on here's top 10 ways to be happy. Like just the most broad self-help thread ever. It's just not going to pick up. Right. And so for me, as I've been growing, slowly broadening a little bit, while not alienating my core audience of Web3. Right. Like, so the amount of times I talk about Web3 is probably about 15% of my content. But at the same time, when I talk broadly, I still make my broad content relevant to people in Web3. So I might not be talking about NFTs, but I'm talking about things that are still relevant for people in NFTs. So it's not as simplistic as talk about a niche 40% time, talk about broad 60%. It's slowly broaden your content, but still make it relevant for people in your niche. To give you an example, yesterday I posted a long form tweet, performed spectacularly. It was just a story about how I was fired from my first job, right? Wasn't about NFTs, wasn't about Web3, wasn't about investing. It was just simply a story about how I got fired from my first job, what it felt like, and what it took to bounce back, and why I'm grateful for that really tough event in my life, right? And so it has nothing to do with Web3, but what made it perform so well is you think about the audience of Web3, it's mostly people in their teens and 20s who might be a little insecure with where they are in life. They don't know if their job's going to work out. They might hate their job. They don't know if they're going to make it. Are they making enough money? You know, they might feel like they need to make way more money to survive. And so the challenges I ran into in that story I told are challenges that are relevant to a lot of people in Web3. And you go into the comment section of this long form tweet, and all you see are NFT profile pictures, right? So it's all Web3 people who engaged, but they're all saying things like, hey, I'm 21. I ran into this exact situation. I'm looking for my purpose in life. Thank you for writing this. Right. Next one. I'm literally reading this down as I go along. This post is a life changer. You're a great role model, NFT god. So like it had nothing to do with NFTs. But what I'm doing as I am growing is I am broadening my content so that I can attract more people, but at the
Beautiful.
same time making it relevant to my core audience so that they don't feel alienated, right?